Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We're going back to that horrible world known as the JRC, but before we do, the usual disclaimers. If you're unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, you're going to find all the pertinent links right there in the description box. Please, in particular, pay attention to the article written in there by NeuroClastic, a small non for profit started by autistics for autistics. In it, they interviewed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's so called behavior modification program. The Judge Roteberg Educational Center doesn't want you to read that article so much. They threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit if they did not remove it from the website. NeuroClastic refused. You know the drill, folks. Please read the article. Share it on all your social media. Also included in there is NeuroClastic's public statement regards to the defamation lawsuit threat, as well as a link to their GoFundMe. We are crowdfunding just in case the JRC ever actually does see through with their threat. Trigger warning 1 will we discuss places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center and Agape Boarding School for Boys. You're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, please make sure to use the headphones, alright? Trigger warning 2. This channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We use profanity on occasion and speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this, very obviously parental supervision is advised, alright? So, where we left off, response. The FDA disagrees with the comments rationale on several points. Let's get it. Let's get it. First, the FDA did consider these measures. Thank you. In fact, if you guys would go back to the original proposed rule, it goes into that in a little bit more detail than it does in this final decision we're reading here. They actually did go through all of that bullshit. They did so that specifically the JRC could not accuse them of bias. That the JRC does not operate off of logic and sense. So they're going to insist that they didn't, even though it's very clear that they did. Remember, these are the folks who did not read the very own articles that they submitted in support of their insanity. However, as we explained in the proposed rule, no critical criteria identify refractory patients, and no rigorous systemically collected data distinguish a refractory population that does not respond to other available treatments. Thank you! The FDA is making it quite clear. Let me put it in layman's terms. Specifically, what they're saying here is the function of a full functional behavioral assessment is not to determine whether a patient is refractory or not. Its function is to set a baseline in order to develop a foundation for which treatment programs that will best serve the consumer at hand is developed. That's what they're for. It's not about determining severity, it's about developing a baseline, a foundation, something to grow off of instead of essentially treating your kid's treatment program like Russian roulette. You don't have to go through Russian roulette treatment if a proper full functional behavioral assessment is done. It's a baseline. That's its sole function. It's a baseline and a guide. It's a beginning. Its job is not to determine severity. It's about to determine where that particular consumer or patient, as the case may be, depending on the department, blah, 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 blah. It's not to determine how severe they are, it's to determine where they are. It's not meant to be something where it's comparing one set of autistics against another. That is not its purpose. That is not the intent behind it. nor could it ever be reliably used in such a fashion. Okay? So I don't blame the FDA for throwing that out. Anyone with two brain cells to rub together that have worked in this field would have done the same. Similarly, members of the panel unanimously concluded that such a subpopulation seems to exist but is very difficult to define. Here we go again. This has been a thing in medicine. It's this idea, but there's this subpopulation that is just more out of control than the others. There would have been a period in time in my life where you would have considered me a part of that subpopulation. Self-injurious behavior, increased aggression. Even had a form of pica when I was a kid, but thankfully I wasn't trying to swallow quarters. I just wanted to really have a whole glass of ice cubes. Okay? I'm no longer within those confines for multiple reasons. I've been through the treatment programs. I'm still in the treatment programs because they don't go away, folks. It's lifelong, just like our diagnosis. It's the fact that our diagnosis and how it affects us fluctuates. The example I've been using most recently, because it's the one that's most recently happened, is during Black Friday. You all remember, I was loud on Twitter. I was overexhausted, over talked out. And by the time it got to that fourth day, after 3 days of 15-hour shifts, I began to revert to some of the more traditional and recognizable traits of my diagnosis. The great difficulty in the ability to be able to form words. Anytime I've gone through extreme stress or traumatic situations, same thing tends to occur. Happens with a lot of us autistics. Functionality fluctuates. The closer we get to burnout, the closer we are to that so-called subpopulation. But here's where the argument gets difficult. We cannot deny that there are autistics that are nonverbal. Maybe they're extremely aggressive. Maybe they have extreme self-injurious behavior that on the outside looking in without any of the information available to us may seem horrifying from the outside. Okay? But what we have learned over the last several decades is that these treatment programs are still able to be successfully used in regards to the population that they are speaking about here. If someone's number one frustration that is causing those aggressive behaviors is because they have, on a more permanent basis, that difficulty of being able to speak, put an assistive device in their hands. A keyboard, even a piece of paper and a pen. Okay? Functionality fluctuates. There are individuals who are affected more severely in certain areas, particularly communication, than I am. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and tell you that they don't. I'm not going to tell you that some of the horrifying realities out there for parents and siblings alike don't exist, because I've seen them. What I will tell you is the answer isn't violence and torture. That even as sometimes as difficult as it is, and for the love of God, believe me when I tell you, I know how difficult it is. It was literally my job. Those other programs can and do work every single day. I've seen it. Maybe your kid's not going to grow up and be me someday. But that doesn't mean that you can't use what we know works so that they could be the best interdependent being and boon to their community that they can be. No violence, food deprivation, or sleep deprivation required. Now, let's continue. We are not persuaded that the JRC has successfully defined a refractory subpopulation by exhausting a selected list of options, and undercuts the certainty in the JRC's claim that its patients are uniquely refractory, because it's garbage. You cannot tell me with a straight face that only at the JRC will you find people that violent and to the point that they have to be violently tortured and held like that. Because the numbers work against you. Numbers don't lie. You have millions working on billions of individuals who are autistic in this world. You cannot tell me with a straight face that none of those kids throughout the rest of the world are not as severe as the ones at the JRC. Because it's nonsense. The logic of our mind suggests, with the numbers that we are looking at, there is no way in hell that there's not other kids that are as severe. The numbers don't work. The YouTube videos don't work, as much as I get angry at those. It doesn't work, does it? Also, again, it is not the full functional behavioral assessment's job to determine if someone's refractory or not. Its full purpose is to set a baseline, a foundation upon which the specific treatment program best suited to the consumer at hand is developed from. It's a way to get a baseline and a foundation so you're not playing Russian roulette with your child's health. Okay? That's its sole purpose. And when used correctly, granted, I may not be much to look at, and I'm not very glamorous, and I'm not exactly living at the Ritz, but I have a life. Maybe a small life if you want to be an AH stan, but you know what? I like my small life. I worked hard for it. I busted my ass for it. And I will continue to bust my ass so that every other autistic out there has access to those same opportunities, while simultaneously doing my part to see the JRC's insanity buried where it belongs. I'm going to go ahead and close out on that, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do tend to get removed from time to time, so please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, don't forget to hit the comments. I appreciate your time. And as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea do hope you have a good one. We'll see you next time. Bye bye, everyone.